Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Whenever unidentified aerial phenomena are reported, there has to be some kind of rigorous process of investigation in order to be able to discount terrestrial causes such as aircraft, flares, atmospheric activity, or, in some cases, outright hoaxes. Join us on Aliens Explored as we look into some of the most famously failed attempts to expose us all as nothing more than gullible fantasists.
Welcome back, listeners, to Aliens Explored, your weekly podcast where we look into UFOs.
Are you sure about that, Stu?
That's easy for me to say. Let me try that again. UAPs, UFOs, otherworldly interventions, and the strange and mysterious out there. But this week, we're not really looking at the strange and mysterious. We are looking at the mundane and terrestrial, aren't we? I'm one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
And this week we're looking at some famous UFO hoaxes.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I was prompted to this by a programme that I watched on BBC iPlayer, so only our British viewers will be able to watch this. I think it's available for about the next year, and it's called Hypernormalization. Documentary, I think it's about 2.5 hours long, but it's worth a look. And what hypernormalization is this idea, this perception that basically what you're being told, you know that what you're being told in the media by our politicians is bullshit. But you don't know what the reality really is. So you have to live in a world that you know to be bullshit. So that's the hypernormalized state. That's your normality is something that you know not to be true. But one of the segments in this show was about when the US Air Force was testing the stealth bombers, which were new in the 1980s. They're testing these stealth bombers in the southwest USA, over the Arizona desert of Southern California, in the UFO belt, as it were. But it just happens that the UFO belt is also a very good testing ground. Clear blue skies over an open desert for testing aircraft. And because they wanted to keep their stealth technology secret from the main competitors at the time, who were the Soviet Union, they actually put out UFO sightings in the media. They said they'd spotted So the US Air Force or the Department of Defense put out these UFO sightings in case anyone had seen one of these aircraft. They say, "Oh yeah, I heard." They'll tell their friends, and their friends say, "Oh yeah, I heard something or I saw something on the TV about that. Yeah, there was a UFO spotted," and to kind of wrong foot them, to put them to kind of kill the story about prototype aircraft. And I mean, if you've ever seen a B-1 bomber. I saw one when I was in California in about 2001, and there was an air show. And American air shows are quite a different thing from UK air shows, because obviously in America they have far more space. And I saw this B-1 bomber, and it really does look completely alien. It's like nothing you've ever seen in the sky before, and it's actually quite sinister. It's this black, sleek shape. And then there was this sort of rumble, because at US air shows, they have enough space to do an actual bombing run so that people can see how destructive this thing can be. So you well believe you see something like that, especially if you've seen it from I saw it fairly up close, but if you were in the desert and you saw it at a distance, you'd think, wow, what is this triangular shape? What is that?
Yes, well, indeed, you get a lot of triangular shapes and in usual, UFO community.
Yeah, as usual, it will be reported to the local air traffic controller, say, "Well, we never picked anything up." No, because it's this new technology that's supposed to avoid radar.
Well, instantly, I mean, that screams to me the readiness of the governments to put out disinformation on UFOs. They're certainly not shy about doing it.
No, so basically, if they're testing a new prototype aircraft, which was actually an evolutionary leap in aircraft technology, and they don't want people to see it, but it's very hard to test an aircraft, even in the wide open spaces of the American Southwest. It's difficult to test something like an aircraft which travels huge distances in a very short space of time without being able to say that definitely no one saw it. People will have seen it. So you kind of put these stories out, so anyone who tries to report it will be dismissed as a crank.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I'm going to say sort of quite early on, but we're going to have possibly a little bit of fun here talking about some of these hoaxes. Some of them I think are quite amusing in their own right, but as albeit an amateur, and I'm very much an amateur ufologist, I hold my hands up to that, I cannot whatsoever condone or approve of any UFO hoax, because it only serves to detract. It's not taken seriously enough as it is, ufology, and hoaxers will only detract from that. Now, I get quite passionate about this, particularly about crop circle hoaxes, and we've talked about that at length in previous episodes, so I won't repeat myself here. But I think the same thing applies with this. So while you hear us, we'll be talking about this and maybe having a bit of a laugh about them, do not in any way take that as any sort of condoning.
Although doesn't the fact that that these hoaxes exist and they are unmasked show that we do actually apply some rigour to our investigations into UFOs? We do actually look at, we are looking for terrestrial causes of it. It's only when we can't come up with one, when we can't see how it was done, that's when we apply the magic. But so when someone does a crude hoax, if they throw a trash can lid into the air like a frisbee and photograph it, well, yeah, we will get that. Or they dangle something on a wire, yeah, we will get that.
Well, there's two thoughts to that. So one is, if it's really that obvious and it's absolutely clearly a fake and that's picked up, well, it didn't take much sort of serious investigation to do in the first place. So that one really wouldn't apply there. But also, there's a danger with it that if we're looking for a terrestrial answer, it's the old thing. You find what you want to find, and if you're looking for it to be a mundane thing, then you'll find it to be a mundane thing. True scientific investigation comes at it with an open mind.
Absolutely, I mean, and also we are far more used now to good cinematic special effects. If you watch old Alien Invaders films from the 1960s, even into the 80s, the special effects look really ropey. So this is Hollywood with all its resources for special effects. Even they can't make it look really real. So what chance has a private citizen with a camera and a trash can lid got of doing something that will convince anyone? So it's only in recent years, films like 4th of July, I guess, that they've been able to do something that actually does look really convincing. And I suppose maybe back in the 60s, back in the 50s, people were convincing, or even the Flash Gordon films of the 1930s, the things that are dangling on a wire with a firework in the back, Flash Gordon's spacecraft. But having seen 21st century special effects, you now look back at those and think, oh yeah, that's really ropey. So maybe at the time people were more easily taken in by that.
Yeah, but you've got to bear in mind the nature of how these things are being watched. So if you go back, I mean, I'm well known as being a Trekkie. I'm a huge Trekkie, and if you go back and watch the original, as it was first transmitted,
episodes of Star Trek, the original series from the 1960s. It looks awful. It's grainy, it's blurred, it's out of focus, the colours are muted. But it wasn't designed to be watched on your 50-inch plasma flat-screen TV. It was designed to be watched on, a 5-inch black and white screen.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, 5-inch. I'm exaggerating, but
yeah, but even in the late 1990s, when I worked at the BBC, and I was ended up in the studios, and Noel Edmonds, a British DJ, had a TV show. Noel Edmonds, what was it? His Saturday Night Live, or his house party or something. And
Noel Edmonds' house party with Mr. Blobby.
With Mr. Blobby, yeah, and he lived in a kind of castle, and I could see the sets for it, and it just looked like crappy cardboard.
Yeah.
And I said, "That's not the actual set, is it?" And they said, "Oh yeah." I said, "But on television, it looks like actual stonework." And this was in the late 1990s, when you're watching it on your low definition plasma screen. People still had not plasma screen, cathode ray tube televisions.
Yeah.
That will look perfectly fine in the 1990s. So it really is a 21st century thing where we have this digital kind of clarity to our images that where that kind of thing just won't stand up anymore.
It's one of the issues that so again, I mean, coming back to the Star Trek thing, a lot of people are talking about sort of remastering stuff and bringing it, the images crisper and clearer. One of the issues they've got is that, of course, they use prosthetics for a lot of the aliens. Well, you can see the lines where the latex meets the skin.
Yeah.
When you actually remaster this stuff, it looks crap, because it was never designed for that. I mean, they even have some issues where you've got things in the show called isolinear chips, which are props, basically. But they'll have little bits of writing on them, or a door panel might have some writing on it. And they'll use, like, quotes from novels and, kind of silly little gags in it. Well, of course, when you start remastering this stuff, you can start to see it as a viewer on screen, and they can't allow that. They're actually having to change stuff with CGI when they remaster it, because they can't show what was actually written and recorded in the first place for copyright reasons.
Wow.
And all sorts of things like that. It runs into all sorts of trouble. It just was never designed to be that way in the first place. But we've done our digression thing.
Yes.
So, hoaxes, then. So, what hoaxes have you come across?
Well, perhaps the most famous one, if indeed you can call it a hoax, was Orson Welles' radio version of The War of the Worlds, which apparently had people in a panic because they thought, because the way it was scripted, it made it sound like it was an actual news report.
Yes, it was.
And had people apparently in a panic. They were prepared to believe that New York had been invaded by Martians who were basically gone on a murderous rampage with their high-tech weapons and were just destroying everything. People believed it, and I think Orson Welles came in for some flack for that. But it also was the making of him. It really got studio bosses excited that someone could create this kind of sensation across the. So there's whether it was a hoax, whether he intended to have that effect, or whether he just thought that would be an interesting way of scripting basically a 19th century novel and bringing it up to date.
That's an excellent. And you're right, quite right. It made, it was the making of him, and of course of the story, which was, I mean, wasn't an unknown story, but I think it was unknown by mass media. By the masses, but no, that's an excellent. It never occurred to me to think of that as a hoax, but perhaps an unintentional. Or do you think there was in his mind when he did it kind of a, I wonder if I'll get people believing this?
Well, apparently the panic was among people who missed the beginning of the show.
Right.
They missed the introduction. So they just tuned in to this news report saying, "Oh, and the aliens they've destroyed the Empire State Building. They're slaughtering people in their thousands." People are in their cars. People are heading out of town as quickly as they can. They're getting, the aliens are destroying them with their disintegrator rays. That's what they tuned into, and had no reason not to believe that it was real.
Well, it's it's something you get even to this day. So you and I were recently involved in a radio show that was. I mean, we can say this. I'm sure it's fine. So it was put out in a very ambiguous way as to whether or not it was genuine. It was very much like some listeners might be familiar with the black tapes kind of thing. This one was called Folklore. I might try and get a link. I might try and get a link out on social media to it, because you and I were both involved in that, and it was put out as you're listening to it, you don't know if it's real or if it's just a show. That kind of, that's very much in the Orson Welles style, but without the warning at the beginning.
Yes, but you click on it because it's effectively you click on it and you know what you look at, and I guess there were people who didn't have any kind of radio guides. They didn't have a Radio Times or whatever. They would just tune, and they would, of an evening, they would just sit down and turn on the radio and see what was on, or listen to what was on.
Turn the radio on, yeah. Conversely, of course, 9/11. A lot of people turned the TVs on and thought they were watching a movie.
Yeah.
So you've got the opposite kind of happening there. Gosh, yeah, no, that's an excellent example. I'm going to give you one going way back to 1967 here in the UK. There were 6 what seemed to be downed, either landed or crashed flying saucers between the Thames Estuary and the Bristol Channel that turned out to be apprentices from it's the RAE, I know that much.
The Royal Aircraft Establishment at
that's
Farnborough.
The one, thank you. Yes, during their Rag Week. You don't hear about Rag Week so much these days, do you?
No, I guess not.
I don't.
No, I think
it's been years since I've heard of Rag Week.
Yeah, I think it was a thing when I was at university back in the 80s. But
it was when I was, a little bit after.
But yeah, it was more about raising money for charity, doing silly things to raise
yes.
rather than not like the kind of hazing that you might go through at an American university in order to join a sorority. It's not that brutal. But yeah, they were doing it to raise money for charity. I don't know how they would. How that worked, but
I know I don't know either. But that's that I would say is an example of a harmless, fun stunt.
So 6 spaceships that occurred across southern England on Monday, 4th of September 1967. A major police and army response followed the discovery of the spaceship, which were 54 inches long, that's 1.4 metres, and 30 inches wide, that's 0.76 metres, and 20 inches deep, half a metre.
Oh, I didn't know there was a police and military response to it.
Yeah, they weighed 100 pounds and emitted an electronic noise. The 6 craft were located along the 51st line of latitude from the Thames Estuary to the Bristol Channel, roughly equidistant from each other, one at each new housing estate near Queenborough on the Isle of Sheppey, Bromley Golf Course in South London, a horse paddock in Winkfield Village near Ascot, and the village of Welford near Newbury in Berkshire, Chippenham in Wiltshire, and on Dial Hill in Clevedon in Somerset. That's
right the way across the bottom of England.
Yeah, from the Thames to the Bristol Channel, so the narrowest part of the south of England. So they created their
narrowest part of the thickest part.
The narrowest part of the thickest part, yeah. So they were made of fiberglass halves, covered them in metal with no aerials or portholes visible. Inside each saucer was placed electronic equipment so that it would make an eerie sound when the saucer was flipped over. Each saucer was also filled with a mixture of flour and water. They carried the sources into fields. Here they flipped the sources over, causing them to emit the electronic sound, then left the field and headed back to Farnborough. None of the teams were detected. So when each of the sources was later reported to the police, each area was cordoned off. The British Army's Southern Command, several police forces, Army bomb disposal units, RAF helicopters were all mobilised. So these things were just on the ground.
Yeah. Oh, they should have notified
the
authorities that they were doing that.
Yeah, so when one of the sources was drilled into, the mixture inside exploded, covering police officers in foul-smelling slime. Gives the names.
I find quite funny.
Yeah, two pranksters, both aged just 21. No action was taken against the hoaxers, and they raised £2,000 for charity, which in 1967 was enough to buy a house. Yeah, so that's a pretty good ragweed. Yeah,
it is. They should have notified the authorities, though. Absolutely.
Well, I guess that was the whole idea. But they weren't punished. There was all. It was a joke. Well, I think in 1967, if you did something for a joke, as long as no one was actually injured or killed, then the police would just laugh it off. Oh, ho, ho, that's a good one, sir. Very, very good.
It was a different time.
It was a different time, different attitudes, kinds of things that were regarded as just pranks or hijinks, which would be regarded as criminal offences now.
Yeah. So, what else you got?
Well, all these hoaxes seem to start back in the days, towards the end of the 19th century. All this whole thing started with airship hoaxes. Even though an airship is really a thing, that one of them was a helium balloon with a burning wicker basket suspended underneath it. Another one in Dallas, three schoolboys hoaxed a mystery airship sighting by soaking a cotton ball in kerosene, tying it to the leg of a turkey vulture. When the bird was released, witnesses to its light shouted, "Look, it's the airship." But the hoax was discovered when the bird landed on the roof of a nearby school and set it on fire.
I worry with that one about, was the bird injured? Because having a bit of burning stuff tied to its leg, how would it get away? I
assume on a long string that wasn't actually setting the bird on fire. But even so, probably fairly distressing for an animal. Now, of course,
can't condone that one.
There was the photograph of an alien taken at Ilkley Moor in 1987. Ilkley Moor in West Yorkshire, December the 1st. Alleged to be of an alien. The English newspaper, the Daily Star, which is probably... Actually, it's not the least reliable newspaper in Britain. I mean, there's tough competition for that prize.
It's definitely gutter press.
It's gutter press. It's not quite National Enquirer or Sunday Sport. It does purport to be
heading that way.
But given the way, here's a good example of the way the Daily Star works. Do you know the story about the falling cow in the Gulf of Japan?
No.
There was a story that was put out that a Russian transport aircraft was, I think this was back in the Soviet era, was preparing to take off when the crew noticed a cow nearby and thought, we'll have that for our dinner. So they herded the cow into the back of their transport aircraft, took off, and they were up in the sky at their cruising altitude over the sea of the Gulf of Japan, and they had this animal running out of control in their transport aircraft. It was endangering them. So what they did was they opened the back door, and they opened the hatch and let the cow run out, where it fell 20,000 feet or whatever and hit a Japanese trawler and sank it. And the crew were apparently arrested. They were picked. The survivors were picked up. I think they all survived. They were picked up, and when they gave their story, they were arrested because no one believed them until it was actually verified that this cow fell out of the sky and crashed through their ship. Now, this story went out on the wires. It went out, I think it was on AP or Reuters, and was picked up by the New York Times. And because people just liked this story, they didn't check it properly. So this story spread a long way before it was eventually revealed as a hoax. And of course, then the hoax became the main story, that how this hoax had gone out and had been reported in serious newspapers. But then after the hoax had been reported, the Daily Star, front page, they reported it verbatim as it happened. This cow fell out of a Russian transport aircraft and sank a Japanese trawler. So that's the kind of level they deal in. It's a good story. Why let the truth get in the way of it? So not the most reliable source. So there was this picture of an alien in its edition of July the 2nd, 1989. Although it was the Daily Star that claimed to expose the hoax, saying that the alien in the picture was in fact an insurance broker, not suspecting he was being photographed while he visited his clientele in the outskirts and cut through the hills. Belgian investigators analysed the case, stated, it's in French, basic translates as, but how can we imagine that experienced investigators could have been misled by such a casual hoax? You took a picture of an insurance broker doing his rounds and said, oh, this is an alien.
Well, I'm going to say with that, but you're saying that one is a hoax. It's never been proven to be a hoax, that one, and the jury is still very much out. Now, the Daily Star are one of these papers, you know, it's a bit like the whole, when we've said about crop circles and Doug and Dave, you know, oh look, someone's come forward, said it's there, right, well that must explain the whole lot because that's like, you know, and no real investigation's done. So that strikes me a little bit like that one. I'm not saying it isn't, it is genuine, it's just, it's never been proven to be a hoax or to be a mistake. Just theorised that it's an insurance salesman.
Yes.
So, yeah, okay. I'm going to give you one from a bit more recent, though. So just back in 2011, in Siberia, there was a man who posted on YouTube a video of what appeared to be a tiny, sort of like couple of feet across, crashed vessel of some description with what appeared to be sort of this tiny alien creature, and it looked very much like the grey aliens, just incredibly small, like, you know,
homunculus.
Yeah, this weird kind of thing. It was splayed out outside the craft. It appeared to have had a leg torn off and was apparently dead, and he took some real close-up video of this thing where you've got this translucent, almost wet-looking skin on it, and it appeared to be naked. Turned out, this convinced a lot of people who thought this was absolutely genuine. And it turned out he hoaxed it himself. He's admitted to this. And he made the alien out of chicken skin stuffed with bread.
Wow.
Now, I've watched this video, and it really does look really convincing. This guy's got a career in special effects ahead of him.
So he peeled off a chicken skin and made a doll out of it.
Basically.
Wow.
But now the interesting thing that I find about this particular story is there are people to this day that say, no, it was real. He's being made to say that he faked it by the governments out there. And this kind of brings me back to, this is one of the problems with hoaxes, is it dilutes things, it pollutes the actual information out there. Now, I believe he hoaxed it. He did a fantastic job of it. But the fact that there are still people out there saying, oh, no, it's real. I mean, they might be right.
They might be, but you know, there are all sorts of motives behind hoaxes. I haven't got time for this one. It reminded me of the 2009 Morristown UFO Hoax, where a couple of guys in New Jersey, a Joe Rudy and a Chris Russo, they basically attached they attached floating red lights. They attached red lights to helium balloons, floated them over New Jersey, and they claim that they described their hoax as a social experiment with the ambition of exposing ufology as a pseudoscience and raising consciousness around unreliability of witness claims. So five flare lights attached to helium balloons, which were seen in the towns of Hanover Township, Morristown, Morris Plains, Madison and Florham Park. So, yeah, but the hoax was seen through.
And not just that, but that is incredibly unscientific. Science says, let's try this thing and see what happens, not let's try and prove this idea that I've got. I think it's this way, let's go out of our way to prove that to be the case. And it failed anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was a social science experiment rather than a natural science experiment. So basically what they want to show is that people will swallow this crap.
It's, but a scientific experiment, whether it's social science or otherwise, would say, okay, there is the possibility that people are just like seeing things that aren't really there or whatever, or they might be seeing it. Let us put this theory out, let's test this idea. That's saying, I believe it's such and such, let's prove that I'm right. Which is bad science. That's bad science.
But it's okay. Kind of muddying the waters, isn't it?
I've got one more hoax to mention, and this is not really a UFO or UAP hoax in of itself. Now, some of our listeners might be familiar. Back in 2001, on computer message boards, back in the day, there was someone claiming to be called John Triter, who claimed to be a time traveller from the year 2036, who had gone back in time to the 1970s to pick up an IBM 5100 computer, because that was able to speak to other computers in the future that had been damaged by a civil war and an electromagnetic pulse had wiped out technology. I mean, it's quite complicated.
Okay.
And really, if you look up John Triter, it is a fascinating subject. But there wasn't an alien component to this. So he answered many questions that people had and made some predictions, some of which have come true. It has to be said. And one of the things he said is that there was speculation in 2036 that alien visitors, whilst they still didn't know exactly who they were and what they were doing, the speculation was that they were actually humans from the future coming back to observe. So
we've discussed this in a previous episode, haven't we?
We
the time
have
travel
indeed. But the whole John Triter thing, there's some people think there is something to it, and it's I'm saying it is a hoax. It's a hoax that's never been proven to be a hoax, and there's been massive rewards offered for anyone who can conclusively prove it's a hoax. So there you go.
And the opposite of reward is, of course, Russo and Rudy, who led off the balloons with flares, pleaded guilty to municipal ordnance charges of disorderly conduct and was sentenced to fines of $250 and 50 hours of community service.
Yeah, proof that it's not a scientific experiment they were doing.
Yeah.
There we go. Fantastic. So there we go. Let's. So hoaxes then, Neil. I mean, are they a bit of fun? Are they, an amusing distraction? What do you think of UFO hoaxes?
I suppose it depends on the hoax, really, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, if you're actually...
As a leading question. Right
yeah,
there,
putting things in... I mean, I live in London where you can't even fly a drone. So a UFO hoax, putting anything in the sky is regarded as a danger. If you let off a sky lantern, well, that kind of thing is strongly disapproved of now because of the damage they've been seen to do. when they come down. But there was always the idea, ho ho, I wonder what people will think this is when they see a light in the sky and not very high, travelling over. But yeah, hoaxes are there. I have to tell the truth, I'm ambushed that question. Do I think they're a good idea? Do I think they're amusing? I think it kind of keeps, if you're a UAPologist,
let's stick with ufologist.
Ufologist. It keeps you on your toes, doesn't it? If someone puts up a hoax just to show that it's all a load of bollocks, and you can quickly dismiss it and say, look, it was done like this, you can easily see how it was done like this, and that any time any kind of UFO sighting is reported, we will look for possible terrestrial causes. We're looking for balloons and flares and prototype aircraft and all sorts of things, atmospheric conditions, all sorts of things that it could be before we start wondering, well, could this be a UFO?
I can't approve. I struggle to see the positive side to them because, as I said at the beginning, it detracts, and it gives the naysayers something to look at and say, oh look, it's all hoaxed.
Well, I guess it's the motivation behind it. If it's like with Rudy and Rosso, their motivation is to ridicule you for even considering these things. It's almost you'd almost wonder, are these people employed by the government to make anyone who questions these things look ridiculous?
That's certainly been put forward as a theory. And what do you think, listeners? Are hoaxes just a bit of fun, or are they damaging to a scientific field? Do let us know what you think in the comments.
Or if you have perpetrated any hoaxes yourself, we would love to have a chat with you about that.
Yeah, not in an aggressive way.
Not in an aggressive way. No, we
want to have a chat with you.
Yeah, you don't need to. We'll actually come round to your door.
Not at all. No. If you have hoaxed, we want to hear about it. We want to hear why you did it, and we won't be too hard on you. We promise.
We're genuinely interested.
Yes, absolutely. We want to understand. So do get in touch by the usual means, Twitter and Facebook, by searching Aliens Explored, or you can find our links on the website aliensexplored.com. And don't forget to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. They really do help us. Do join us next time when we will be looking into the Aetherius Society.
The Aetherius Society.
Have you come across those before, Neil?
I haven't, no.
Oh, that'll be an interesting one. They're I suppose you'd call them a religious group that does believe heavily in alien intervention in our lives. Yeah, we'll be going into that in some depth next week. In the meantime, though, keep watching those people doing things they shouldn't be doing in fields, and I do mean hoaxing, I don't mean other stuff. And the skies. Take care for now.
Bye-bye.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored, or visit aliensexplored.com.